Hey, this is Garrett. I'm really excited to share this video with you. This Myths and Truths presentation that you're about to see, it's one I did a while back, but it's still one of the most popular presentations I've done. I regularly get feedback from people who watch it saying that something they heard shifted their perspective and really helped them feel better about their past or the struggles that they still face. See, too often in my work or in conversations I have with people that struggle, I hear the same thing over and over. There's just so much misinformation and confusion out there around addiction that it's really holding people back or keeping them stuck from making that progress that they want. And that's what this video is all about. It's about busting some of those common myths and sharing some of the little known truths about addiction and about recovery that I've discovered in my own journey. So if you're struggling right now and you're not able to get from where you are to where you want to be, then something in this video might provide that clarity, or it might bust a myth to help you move forward to get to that place that you really want to be. And just to be clear, this video is merely intended to be informational and thought-provoking. There's nothing that I share that is intended to treat, diagnose, or cure any condition or disease. If you are struggling right now in active addiction and you need help, or you want a professional diagnosis, then reach out to a licensed mental health professional like an addiction counselor, a therapist, or a psychologist. Because the work that I do as a certified professional recovery coach is to help people who are in recovery to tap into their strengths and determination and that innate wisdom that they possess to get them unstuck so they can reach their potential for success and happiness. Bottom line, I help people leverage what is going well and what is right about them to get as far as they want to go in their recovery. Now, developing that sense of hope or finding that confidence that a better future is right for you or possible for you, it can happen with just learning a couple new ideas or letting go of some myths that have been holding you back. So if you're looking for that opportunity, if you want some ideas that will help break you free from some of the struggles and challenges that you've faced, provide that clarity for how you can navigate those challenges in your life and get that hope for a better future, then pay close attention to this video. In the next few minutes, you'll certainly hear something that will help provide that perspective shift or provide that clarity. And take some notes. I would love to hear what it is that you hear in this video that helps provide that hope or provide that change of perspective. So I look forward to hearing from you after you check out this quick presentation. All right, looks like we're live. So thanks for checking this out. Thanks for joining. I just wanted to do a quick presentation talking about some things that really become obstacles in people's lives in recovery. It can trip people up on their recovery journey or prevent people from even starting that recovery journey because of some myths that they fall prey to, or some truths about the recovery journey that they just don't know yet. They haven't been told, haven't been shared with them. Just some things that could help them tremendously, could help us all tremendously, but they haven't heard, so they can't benefit from that wisdom or that knowledge. Real quickly, you're in the right place if you're struggling to start or maintain your recovery journey. You know, if you've been battling with a substance or a behavior for a period of time and maybe you don't think that you're addicted to it, but you struggle with it or you've abused it and you'd like to give it up or cut back, and you just kind of want to start that journey, well, then you're in the right place. You're in the right place if you're in recovery, but it feels like a game of survival. Excuse me. If you've started that journey in recovery, but it feels like every day is just a survival against cravings, against triggers, against the struggles of dealing with consequences of your past and dealing with overwhelming shame and guilt. If that's what your recovery journey is like, shouldn't be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. So you're in the right place. You're in the right place if you worry about addiction or your recovery all the time. You know, it is certainly a part of your life. And if you're in recovery, it will always be a part of your life, but it shouldn't be the only focus of your life. Of course, during challenging times and during when we face obstacles and challenges and setbacks, we need to focus some more time and attention on our recovery journey, but it shouldn't be the only thing that we focus on. Everything else shouldn't be affected by or come at a cost of how much time and energy we're thinking about it, because then we begin to overwhelm ourselves and then we begin to ruminate on something all the time and forget to apply time, energy, and attention to some other things in our life that can really help us enjoy our true potential and really live into our true potential. You're in the right place. You found recovery, but there's a void. This is part of my story, having a tremendous void inside that I needed to fill or find some way to fill with what I used or what I found was a greater sense of meaning and purpose. Maybe you're in recovery, but you feel like an outsider. You're constantly hiding behind guilt and shame or self-doubt, or you just feel like you're different than everybody else. You can't fit in somewhere. You're afraid to go out. You're afraid to connect. You're afraid to be in certain environments because you feel like an outsider. Maybe you're in recovery, but you're not where you thought you'd be by now. Maybe you've been working at your recovery for a period of time, but you just haven't gotten to that place that you thought you would be after this number of months or this number of years in your recovery journey. So if any of those kind of resonate with you or sound familiar to your situation, then you're absolutely in the right place. And I've got something to share with these myths and these truths that will certainly help you in your journey. So a little bit about my story. So 2013, it's really where I hit an emotional rock bottom. I was at a place where I thought I had everything I thought I was supposed to have in life. I had a great job, a great career, making great income, lots of travel, a very fulfilling and rewarding profession. But I felt dead inside. I had a tremendous emotional void inside, and it was eating away at me. And the only way I knew how to deal with it was whatever substance or behavior I could engage in or indulge in to help avoid or escape or numb that emotional pain that I was experiencing. And fortunately, in 2013, I kind of got to that emotional rock bottom place, and I began to challenge or question some fundamental beliefs that I'd held about life, some fundamental understandings that I had about myself and about what and the world and my place in that world. And by doing that, it allowed me to make some serious, significant changes and really start that journey in recovery. I would love to say that it was all the positives and all, um, you know, periods of growth and periods of uplifting and periods of positive change. But of course, with any journey, it's not like that. It's not just a line that goes straight up. There's a lot of successes and then there's some setbacks. But as long as that path over time is on an upward trajectory, I think that's the best that we can hope for and the best that we can expect. And as long as we keep that journey going long enough, we can really kind of raise the level to which we are experiencing that happiness, joy, and true fulfillment in our life. So, it started out, I was resigned to suffer before I realized or would even contemplate that something needed to change. Maybe I suspected that some things needed to change, really didn't want some of the negative consequences, but wasn't ready to make that change or wasn't really at that emotional rock bottom place to really invest the time and the energy to figure out what changes to make. And then long enough in that period, had that determination to change, began to gain some awareness. With those changes also came some severe anxiety. There were periods of time where I was struggling with regular panic attacks, and I have to run and sit in my car or go sit in a room alone at work and just kind of do some breathing exercise or anything I could do to prevent having a panic attack. There were some times I was walking on the beach, even just trying to get some exercise and move, and was starting to get the tunnel vision and thought I would pass out. So had to sit down very quickly. So, periods of very severe anxiety. And then, a couple more wins, some more regaining of control, learning some new things, dealing with the anxiety in an effective way, getting to the root cause of some of that, gaining some new control, and then some setbacks, as many people experience in their life. And it got to a dark place again, where I had some ideation, some thoughts that really scared me and made me realize, kind of reinvigorated my efforts to grow and to change. Had some spiritual growth, some spiritual development, found a greater sense of meaning and purpose, and then struggled with some depression. I think a lot of the growth, sometimes it can put us in a period where we affect a lot of changes, but with a lot of change sometimes comes experience of overwhelm and kind of being spread too thin. When we get really excited, want to do a lot of things, and we get spread too thin, then that can affect the way that we show up and cause or promote some feelings of depression. And then fears and doubts. And I think there's another green one that's probably hidden by the camera right now, which you can't see. But here we go. Complete fulfillment and devotion to service. Hopefully you got a sneak a peek behind that. So that's kind of what my journey looked like and what really kind of set me on this path to not only trying to become the best version of myself, but to take everything that I learned in my journey and see what I can do to help other people in their journey so that they didn't have to struggle with some of the same struggles I did. And they don't have to struggle with some of the same struggles and limitations that many people that have faced addiction or living in recovery face. So that's why I want to do this quick presentation just about some myths and about some truths that can help you in your journey. So addiction myth number one, this is really the biggest thing, and this hurts so many people, and it frames the understanding of addiction incorrectly and creates a lot of negative consequences. And so this myth is that the reason people become addicted is because, and I left a blank there because if you put in any answer, especially any single word answer, it's going to be false. It's not true. Some people, these are some common answers that come up. It's because genetics. People become addicted because of learned behaviors, conditioned responses, traumatic experience, life events, or they are too weak-willed or have a brain disease. All of these things, though there might be elements of truth to it, those of these might be contributing factors to somebody's struggle with addiction. It's not the reason that they became addicted. And one of the reasons I really want to point this out is if we fall into believing these myths and thinking that they are whole truths, then it really limits ourselves. It limits the hope that we have. For example, if I say that somebody is addicted because it's genetic, well, what does that do to somebody when they think that they have a genetic predisposition to addiction? First thing it does is it takes away all of their control over making much of a change or affecting much of a change, because they were destined to have this struggle. They were destined to live this life. It also can create complacency in people that don't see genetic markers or genetic evidence of addiction in their family or in their close family. And that can create complacency and put people in a position where they don't really understand or appreciate the true risks or risk factors that can lead somebody to addiction. Learned behavior. So yes, some people, there's an element of learned behavior because they see a lot of people around them doing something or indulging or engaging in something. Then yeah, there can certainly be a contributing factor to it, but that's not the reason. If there wasn't something else going on in their life, something that created emotional pain or a emotional void inside of them, then learned behavior wouldn't manifest in the extreme behaviors of addiction that is defined as addiction. Conditioned response. There's certainly some truth to that. We do certainly condition ourselves toward addictive tendencies by seeking something external to our body. When we seek something external to our body that has a tremendous capacity to help us avoid or escape or numb some certain pain in our life, then yes, we can condition ourselves to wanting that thing more. But if we didn't have that tremendous pain or that void or something else that was going on to start with, then that conditioned response wouldn't take root and wouldn't manifest or foster that addiction the way it is. A traumatic experience or life events, absolutely. There's certainly people that struggle with addiction, and there is an element of or a contributing factor of traumatic experiences that happen in their life. Absolutely. But again, we got to be careful with this, because if we suggest that or say that the reason somebody becomes addicted is because of a traumatic experience, then we're using such a wide brush that we're suggesting that if you have a traumatic experience, you're going to have to struggle with addiction. And that's a very dangerous thing to assume or to even suggest, because now people that have had traumatic experiences, we're conditioning them, or we're making them believe, or we're fostering that belief that they have to struggle with some kind of addiction. And also, it promotes this idea that if somebody has struggled with a traumatic experience, that there has to be some negative manifestation from that. There's certainly a lot of discussion around post-traumatic stress disorder. So trauma in and of itself is just an experience that somebody goes through that makes a fundamental change in their beliefs, their values, their understanding of the world. Something that was so terrible that it changed forever their understanding of life, of the world, their values, their beliefs. For some people, they have a stress disorder after that. They have abnormal response to normal stimuli following a traumatic event. For other people, there's also this thing called post-traumatic growth. That's somebody that goes through a traumatic event, and instead of creating negative consequence, actually promotes a tremendous amount of growth. Their life is redefined in a positive way with new values, new beliefs, new understanding, and new things that they're engaged in. So suggesting that a traumatic event is what causes addiction might be a contributing factor, but it's certainly not a whole story. And then lastly, this is just some, kind of rhetoric and shaming language that's used to talk about people to explain people that struggle with addiction from people that have no idea what they're talking about. And that's this fact that, they're just weak-willed. Like they just, they don't have the discipline, they don't have the willpower. That's all it is. And that's why they struggle with addiction. Well, the truth is there's many stories of people that are running 5, 6, 7, 8-figure businesses. They're CEOs or C-suite officers or executives at successful businesses, or very prolific authors, very prolific artists in their own right. And that certainly requires a lot of willpower and a lot of discipline to manifest those things. So the fact that, it's certainly not a fact that somebody just doesn't have the willpower. There's actually a lot of changes that take place in the brain, and a lot of things, there is some conditioned response, there is learned behavior. There are a lot of these things that are factors or influence or contribute to, but not one of them is the cause of addiction. So here's the truth. The truth is that addiction is a result of a complex combination of factors. that are biological, psychological, sociological, and spiritual in nature. And the path to addiction is unique to the individual. There's an estimated 24 million people in America alone that are struggling today with addiction. That's 24 million different life stories, different combinations of conditioning, of experience, of genetic factors, of those learned conditions, of the condition, the condition element. But there's 24 million different combinations, and for each person, their pathway is unique to them. It's really important to understand because these causes of addiction are as varied as the number of people who struggle with it. No two people follow exactly the same path to their addiction. There's no two people have exactly the same combination of factors or elements that contributed to or caused their addiction. So here's an addiction recovery myth, and I'm covering up a couple of those words of myth, but the myth is that the only way for somebody to find recovery or be cured of addiction is, again, it's a blank, because there's any word that you would put in there is not going to be a true statement. So a recovery myth is that, the only way to find recovery is following the 12 steps, or finding religion, or going to meetings, or using MAT, or not using MAT, or hitting an emotional rock bottom. Sometimes we perpetuate this myth, or we hear this myth that, somebody will finally get over it once they've hit rock bottom, and they just must not have hit rock bottom yet. Well, that's a bunch of crap. A lot of people find recovery, they never hit what somebody would refer to as a rock bottom. And I suggest there's probably people that live at rock bottom for a number of years, and it's not enough to help them make that positive change and join their recovery. Using MAT, okay, for some people, MAT is a great thing. For other people, they don't. MAT doesn't have to be a part of the recovery. But thinking that somebody's not in recovery because they're on MAT, I mean, that's absurd. I don't even start that discussion because I'll go on for 30 minutes just about how that is. But suggesting that somebody is not in recovery because they're not using MAT or because they are using MAT, it's just not true. For every individual, again, every individual has their own story, their own pathway. Going to meetings, for some people, that's great. For some people, it provides tremendous amount of help, and it really helps foster their recovery journey. If that's been if that's been a big part of your recovery journey, that's awesome. And I think you should celebrate that. For other people, more meetings isn't going to help. It's not going to be a part of the recovery journey. It's not going to help them get out of or figure out the special combination of tools and resources and support that they need to really thrive in their recovery. So suggesting that somebody's just not doing well in recovery, they keep relapsing because they need to go to more meetings, okay, that's just very short-sighted and very and just not true. Finding religion, for some people, that's absolutely a huge element of their recovery. For other people, not so much. For some people, that's the missing piece, or the thing that finally helps them establish and maintain a long-term recovery. For other people, there's other things that need to be met. So there's some people that are extremely religious and still struggle with addiction. So to suggest that finding religion is the only way to find true recovery, look within any religion, any organized religion, you're going to find people that are very devout, very connected with their religion, and very much struggling with addiction. So that's certainly not the end-all be-all cure. And then following the 12 steps. 12 steps, it can be an incredibly great program, can work wonders for many people. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, following the 12 steps as traditionally laid out or traditionally understood isn't going to be their pathway to recovery. And that's perfectly fine. If they can find a different pathway to recovery, then that's something that we should celebrate, and that's something that we should promote for that individual. But certainly the 12 steps is not a one-size-fits-all solution that will help anybody in their journey. So an addiction recovery truth then is that an individual's pathway to their best recovery involves that right combination of tools, resources, support necessary to completely and holistically address their unique, back to those 4 contributing factors: biological, psychological, sociological, and spiritual needs. An individual's path, every individual's path to addiction is different. Every individual's path to recovery looks different. Every individual's understanding of what recovery is different, which is kind of another point. For us to suggest that somebody is not in recovery or somebody needs to do something different in their recovery because they're not experiencing, they're not living our version of what we think recovery should look like, well, it's their life, it's their journey, and their recovery is going to look different than our own. We should judge another person by how well they're conforming to what they believe their recovery should look like, not what we think their recovery should look like. So for a person's best path in recovery, they just need to find that right combination of tools, resources, and support. And depending on what those contributing factors were for that individual that got them to that place in active addiction, it's going to be a different combination of tools and resources to help them get their way out and really live into a thriving recovery. There's the other truth that the number of pathways to addiction recovery are as varied as the number of people who struggle with it. There's no two people will be equally served by the same approach. This is really important for two reasons. For one, when we're trying to help another person or when we see another person that struggles, we got to realize and recognize and value this fact that their pathway to recovery is going to be different than ours and anybody else's that's ever struggled with addiction. Their best pathway. Now, it might look very similar. They might get some benefits from an approach that we followed, a philosophy that we followed, a therapist that we followed, a religious organization that we followed that's helped us. Sure, they might get some help from it, but it's more likely that they're going to need a different combination of tools and resources to deal with their specific situation. And the number of pathways is going to be as individual as varied as that individual. The other thing I was trying to say was we need to remember that our pathway is going to look different than everybody else's for our own sanity and for our own mental health. And if we look at somebody else and they are doing better or have made a quicker recovery or seem to be struggling a lot less in their recovery than us, we can't assume that we need to do exactly what they're doing to experience the same things that they're experiencing. And if we're, find ourselves beating ourselves up because, we're not having the same results that other people in our home group or other people that are working the same program or other people that have the same sponsor or other people that have done whatever, X, Y, Z, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us. It doesn't mean that we're extra defective. It just means that we haven't found the right combination. And whatever that person found, that's their better combination. We need to find our own right combination of tools, resources, and inspiration. So this is a graph that I love to share because it really draws to what this problem is, or what the, societal problem is that perpetuates a lot of these myths and prevents us from learning a lot of these truths. So let's stop this conversation about addiction for a moment, and we're just going to look at these graphs. I want you to imagine that these are three-dimensional objects. And so this is a cone, like an upside down ice cream cone, or maybe like a street cone or emergency cone that you'd find on the side of the road. And imagine that you were to take a light and shine a bright light down from the top of it so that this floating object would cast a shadow below it. If you took a cone, you shine a bright light above it, the shadow would be a circle. So it's a three-dimensional object. The shadow is going to be two-dimensional. It's going to be a circle. If you were to take an hourglass and you were to do the same thing, you cast a very bright light shining above it, it would cast a circle shadow below it. The third object here is a cylinder, so kind of like a soda can, like a Pepsi can. If you were to shine a bright light above it, it would cast a shadow. The last thing is a sphere, so like a ball, imagine a baseball or a tennis ball. Same thing, it's going to create a shadow if you shine a light. Why I point this out, I believe that our collective understanding of what addiction is and our individual understanding of what addiction is very similar to the similarity between these shadows that are cast on the ground. We identify addiction. If you look into the DSM, I think there's 11 symptoms that if somebody is expressing a certain number of them, then they either have mild, moderate, or severe struggle with substance use disorder. When we look at those symptoms, I believe that's what's defining this circle right here. We look at these symptoms and we think, okay, that person exhibits these symptoms, they're struggling with addiction. That person exhibits these symptoms, they're struggling with addiction. But what we're not seeing is the cause for that addiction or the root that got that person to the place that they are. We're only looking at the behaviors and the actions and the tendencies and the characteristics or the character traits of the individual that's in addiction. But somebody who has a biological predisposition or some biological components to addiction, they're going to act and behave in the same way. Somebody who has a spiritual or a psychological cause or pathway to their addiction, they're going to have those same traits. But it's really important to understand, if we don't look back and we don't look, kind of get to the root cause, then we look at two people that are acting in a similar way, we might fall prey to this idea that their pathway to recovery or even their pathway to addiction was similar, when in reality, two completely different sets of conditioning and circumstances and life events could have gotten that person to exhibit these symptoms of addiction, but two drastically different approaches to recovery are going to be required to help somebody move beyond addiction and really thrive in their recovery. So let's see, I keep covering up these words. So the reason I put 4 up here is because that represents, I mean, I understand that there's 4 potential pathways, potential areas of somebody's life that there can be a void or a pain that leads to their addiction. One is biological, another is psychological, another sociological, another spiritual. And each of these has specific, there's certain traits of how these things manifest in each of these areas. And there's certainly certain approaches to dealing with or helping somebody if their root cause of their addiction or some of the root cause of their addiction fall in these different areas. So in reality, what somebody's, the conditioning or the set of circumstances that leads somebody to an active addiction, it's more likely not all falling in one of these areas, but it's a special combination of factors or influences in each of these areas. But in each of these areas, there's an infinite number of contributing factors that can be spiritual or biological or psychological or sociological. But for each person, it's going to be a different combination of those things that leads them down that path, that leads them to those symptoms, those behaviors, those traits that we might identify in the DSM that we call addiction, because when we look at it, they have certain character traits. So how this shows up, a really important thing for me, and this is really something that has fueled my passion, really drawn me into this industry of serving people and helping people who struggle with addiction, is recovery isn't a life of cravings and triggers. Learning to move beyond an active addiction and finding your journey in recovery, it should not end with tools and techniques that help you avoid the daily cravings or avoid daily cravings and dealing with the things that trigger you. That's not what recovery should be. And maybe that's a good first step, but it needs to move much beyond that. And so when I mentioned this kind of fueled my passion for it, I see too many people that are struggling in their recovery, and they think their life needs to be defined by just that constant pain against those cravings and those triggers and just learning how to cope or learning how to deal. I think that falls far too short of somebody's true potential. Sometimes the steps, whatever you're doing, the steps aren't the best steps for you or the next best step for you. Depending on where you are, if you're working a certain program, if you're following a certain philosophy or approach to recovery, sometimes the way that it's laid out is not the best thing for you to be doing at that time, or the best thing for you to be doing next. A big place, a very common place where some people get tripped up if they're working through a traditional 12-step model is through the 4th step, when they're starting to identify their character traits, their moral failings. If you are early in your recovery, you are already shadowed by so much shame, by so much guilt, by so much self-doubt, by so much, just self-deprecation, just negative self-talk, all of these things that are already working against you. If you're very early in your recovery journey, it can be very difficult to dig even deeper into that pain before you have started to build a stronger foundation of your value and of your worth. If you're doing this early in your recovery, or even if you just keep kind of bumping up against some area of your journey, whether it's the 4th step or any other step, if you're following the 12-step model, then it could be likely that you're just approaching something at a wrong time or from a wrong way or for a wrong reason, because your journey to active addiction was different than somebody else's. Somebody else might get tremendous value from this, and it might really help them and bolster their recovery journey. For you, it might not, and that's okay. You just have to understand that maybe you need different tools, different resources, something else to help you. If you don't get to the root, nothing fundamental will change. So I've been working with a client recently who, she's been in recovery for a while, but things don't really seem to be getting better. Her life is that one that's just defined by those cravings and constant triggers, and she just copes with it as best as she can. With some of the work that we've been doing together, we've been helping get to some of the root causes of those pains, some of the early memories, some of the childhood memories, even some of the things that happened before she has recollection of that time in her life. And by dealing with that and releasing some of the emotional charge from those times and those events in her life, that's really getting to the root. Now we can uncover what caused some of those biological, those sociological, and those spiritual pain points that she has. And only by getting to that root and helping ease that emotional tension or that emotional pain from the very root can somebody make those fundamental changes in their life and really live into their potential in recovery. Now, sometimes the path is too simple. So if we're following a recovery journey and we're feeling stuck, we're bumping up against something. I love this quote by Einstein. It says, "Everything in life should be as simple as possible, but not simpler." Sometimes the steps between, and I'm not just referring to the 12 steps, but anybody's pathway in recovery, they're going to have steps that they progress on as they go down that journey. Sometimes those steps are not close enough together that we can effectively get from one to another. That would be a case where it was oversimplified. I can just, I can tell you to be successful in recovery, just change your thought patterns, change your behaviors, change your beliefs. That would be extremely simplified, and that sentence alone wouldn't be enough to help you experience a good recovery. Everything in life should be as simple as possible. We also shouldn't complicate somebody's journey in recovery by putting in a whole bunch of things that aren't serving them in the best capacity or in the right way. Again, depending on what your pathway was to your active addiction, there's going to be a different pathway to your recovery. And if we're over complicating your pathway to recovery by burying you down or focusing too much in the wrong areas, then that's not going to help you. So we need to make it simpler than that so we can identify your issues. And I say your, but I mean my, and I mean everybody else in recovery is also, we need to identify our issues so that we can make the progress in the right direction, in the right way, in the most effective and efficiently as possible. So if you're feeling stuck, if any of those symptoms that we came across in the beginning, whether you're in recovery and you feel like you should be further along, or you're struggling too much in recovery, it's a game of survival for you, you're spending too much time thinking about it. If you're feeling stuck in any way, then remember that there's going to be different areas that need to be addressed. Maybe you're just not addressing one of those areas, or you're not addressing the right one next. So biological, there can be, there's different things that you can do to change your neurochemical response. I don't just mean with drugs and with, I don't mean with treatment, prescription drugs. And I don't just mean some new behaviors to lower the stress. There's many things that we can do. Physiological, strengths, or psychological rather, so strengths focused, empowered. So a good program is going to not just look at your defects and their faults and your flaws, but it's going to look at your strengths and teach you how to leverage those strengths. Sociological, maybe you've been focusing on biological and psychological, but sociological is an incredibly important part for many people. Looking at those, the biology of fostering good connections. For some people, they just can't get past that point that they are because there's this gaping hole, or there's this big critical void in their sociological factors or sociological influences and their sociological foundation. And lastly, spiritual. Religion can be a big part of that for many people, but spirituality extends to include meaning and purpose and joy. So things that are naturally bringing joy into our life and meaning and purpose and our improved sense of worth. A pathway to recovery that's really going to help you and prevent you from getting stuck and help you really live into your true potential is going to be something that's holistic and looks at all of these areas. So here's a couple of quotes that I read, some people talking about my work, and there were a couple of things in here that really jumped out that made me think, yeah, that's why my journey has been the way that it has. And, even though I've had those setbacks, I've still had many successes. And one of the things that I've shared with other people have really been, fundamentally helping them change their situation in recovery, because this is where we focus. And so Gina said, if you want to find out what your true potential is, Garret Biss is the one for you. He has the tools and the passion to see it through, and will work with you every step of the way. So the first thing I highlight here is find out what your true potential is. It's not about find out how to struggle less in your recovery, find out how to prevent relapse, find out how to lessen any of the negative effects of a journey in active addiction or the struggles in recovery. That's not what it's about. It's got to be about something that's positively focused. It's got to be about not reducing the number of things that are pulling you down. It's got to be about increasing the number of things that are pulling you up, and really looking forward to your potential and leveraging your strengths so you can get to a better place. That's what a real journey in recovery should involve, or should be focused on, and every step of the way. So as we talked about, for some people, some programs, some approaches don't have all the steps that they need to get there. For other people, the steps go down a different path and where they really need to do the work, where that real, that core or that root problem lies. You need to have tools and resources to guide you every step of the way for your journey, not just every step of the way through a prescribed philosophy or approach that have helped other people. You need to figure out every step of the way for your journey, or my journey, or our journey individually is the key. And then Demo said Garret has a unique ability to develop a program that not only gives you an experience that can change your life, but also gives you practical strategies to get the change that you want. I want to highlight the word experience here, because ideas, new information, new resources, they don't really do anything for us. It wasn't ideas and it wasn't information that shaped our behaviors, our beliefs, and a lot of the conditioning that led us to that active path that path in active addiction, or that active struggle with addiction. Everything in life that really guides and controls our subconscious is experiential. So a journey in recovery needs to be experiential in nature. You need to experience some growth, experience some changes, experience some new positive inspiration, positive tools, those positive changes. You need to experience it in a way that it reshapes you. It can help heal those things that are inside of you, and it can help bolster the good positive things that are helping lift you up. But it must be experiential in nature. If you've read 30 books on addiction and 30 books on recovery, and you've read every blog and you're part of every group and you've sat in all the meetings and it's just not clicking, it's just not making that change that you think it should, it's because all you're doing is taking information. That information itself isn't going to do anything. It's only information with some action that creates an experience. That's what can actually change somebody and really help them get to that place in their recovery. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out this quick video. I'm sure if you were paying close enough attention that you heard something that either provided clarity about some of the challenges you face, or it provided hope for a better recovery in your future. If you've struggled with any kind of addictive behavior in your life and you've begun that journey into recovery, but you're feeling stuck and you're not able to get to the place that you want to be, I want to invite you to jump on the phone with me for a private consultation to see if there's anything I can do to support your journey and help you live into your true potential while experiencing that recovery that you really want. If you want to gain clarity about the struggles that you're still facing or the obstacles that you haven't been able to overcome, then let's connect. You can simply reply to an email from me or click on the link wherever you're watching this video to schedule that private meeting with me. You know, there's millions out there who suffer silently because of the effects of past addictive behaviors. That doesn't have to be you, and it doesn't have to be the reality for someone that you love either. If you know someone who is struggling to get where they want to be in recovery and to reach their full potential, then please share this video and extend to them my offer to connect privately. Thank you for your time, and I can't wait to connect with you soon.